What's up? Welcome in. Hoge and Jahns back with you from Indianapolis, surviving. As you can tell, my voice cracking right off the start of the show. That's a good start. What's going on,
Because it was a good night?
Yeah, it was a good night, to be honest with you.
You and I were together. When did we go our separate ways?
About around midnight, I think.
I think it was later than that.
You think so?
I went to another bar. You went to the further bar.
Yeah.
I got a bit lazy. Didn't want to walk home from that further bar.
Well, it does. You know, where you stay in this town does affect where you end up late.
I know there's this thing called Uber nowadays, but for some reason I don't like taking them.
I like to get my steps in while I'm here. You know, to be honest, because you know this, I'm a scooter guy. Like, I'll get on these little Lime scooters, and I haven't done that a single time this week.
The only reporter I've ever seen do that is Patrick Finley, who...
No, he hates them.
Good friend of George McCaskey, who is not here because he's homesick.
Yeah. No, Pat hates those scooters.
but he's taking them before.
Knocks them down, which I probably shouldn't say on the show. He'll literally just knock them down because apparently they destroyed San Diego or something. Who knows?
We have seen Pat Finley kick the scooters here at Indianapolis, but I've also seen him ride them as well.
Yeah. No, we missed Pat this week. We had a good dinner last night. Good stories, old friends, good stuff. And you know what got me in trouble last night was, and I'm going to blame Courtney Cronin for this, the 10 p.m. dinner shots. And I'm not talking about shots. I'm talking about we ordered espresso shots.
You did.
Which I needed in that moment, but that gave me way more energy than I needed the rest of the night.
I got ice cream.
Yeah, that's true. That did happen. You know, have you ever mixed that together? It's amazing.
Yeah.
I think they call it an affogato. I think so. Good stuff. Anyway, we are surviving here in Indy. It's been a good week, and we got a good show coming your way today. Make sure you're following us on Twitter at Adam Hoge, at Adam Jahns. Theathletic.com is where you go to read Johnsy and the whole athletic crew. Athletic.com/Hoge and Jahns. If you're not a subscriber, you'll get a great deal there. We got we got Scott Dochterman coming on today, who covers college football for The Athletic. He'll help us with some of the prospects that we want to talk about. And then Dave Birkett, who covers the Lions. We'll check in with him because it's been an interesting week for Ben Johnson, I feel like. So we want to do a little temperature check on Ben Johnson. We also want to start the show, too, with a little temperature check on maybe some of the free agent rumblings, which I feel like we always kind of do on the second combine show here in Indy every year. You start to hear things. You start to put pieces together. And obviously, the most of the conversations, at least that have been brought up to me down here in Indy, have been about the offensive line. I'll share this, and then I mean you chime in with anything you feel on it. But I will say I am a lot less confident that Trey Smith will be a Bear than maybe I was a week or two ago. Because I think what Brett Veach said publicly the other day, I couldn't tell, what's he going to say? Of course they want to keep him. But the more I talk to some people on that, the Chiefs do seem like they are fairly confident they'll be able to keep him. Now, what I just don't know is if he'll actually reach the open market. Because if he reaches the open market, anything can happen. But right now, it does seem like it's unlikely he ends up with the Bears.
Well, this is where you would get a gauge on things.
Yeah.
Right? If you're Trey Smith's side, like this is where it happens. This is the unofficial start of free agency. This is where the information is gathered. And I'm with you. I don't see, like, you have to be prepared for both scenarios if the Chicago Bears. One, where he entertains all free agent options, where you're now competing in the open market, where you have to be ready to reset the guard market if you're the Chicago Bears. And then there's Plan B. You got to have a plan B if the player that Ryan Poles helped draft in Kansas City isn't available. And I'm sure the Bears have a plan B.
Yeah. Now, I'm not ruling it out. I want to be clear. It's just because I don't think anyone really knows what's going to happen until the bullets start flying. I mean, you've heard stories. Maybe you watched Hard Knocks last year with the Giants. Like, it is a kind of a wild west there the first few hours of free agency, and no one really knows how it's going to go. But it does. If it seemed a couple weeks ago like the Chiefs weren't going to be able to keep him, that seems like actually that door has opened back up, and there is a world where that happens. Now, who are a couple of guys who, again, not for sure, obviously, but a couple of guys I could see end up on the Bears in a couple weeks? I think I would keep an eye on Drew Dahlman, the center, and a guy we've talked about before, Kevin Zeitler, possibly coming over from the Lions. He's obviously an older veteran. But with the Ben Johnson connection there and just knowing, like, here's a plug-and-play guy you're going to be able to get at least one more season out of, I would watch that one too.
Now, these aren't the A-level free agents that maybe Dahlman, at least in this free agency class. they're not the big swings. They're the big money swings that we have talked about in the previous podcast.
Mm-hmm.
Not the A market, maybe the B market, maybe Dahlman's part of A, B there, but the Bears have to address it. If there's any temperature to relay at this point, is that the Bears are widely expected to spend money on the interior of their offensive line in some capacity. Now, who that happens to be remains to be seen. There's still 2 weeks before free agency officially opens or the negotiation window gets going. Maybe 10 days now. We're losing track of time.
Mm-hmm.
But I think you and I can both agree the vibe here in Indy is that the Bears are going to spend money, and that will start in the trenches in the middle of their offensive line.
And I'll say this, too. I haven't talked to us. Well, I think most people I've talked to view the Bears as dangerous this year. Like they have a pretty decent roster. They can spend some money and be competitive. Like, I think the Bears have been identified around the league as a team that, like, and the reason I bring this up now is when it comes to free agents, like, guys that want to win, guys that want to go somewhere where they can win. I think that the Bears are being viewed as a destination that, hey, it's not like you're going to sign with this awful team and, you know, be bad for 4 years.
It's the other buzz is you still got Caleb Johnson, and you got Caleb Johnson.
That's confusing, by the way. I had that happen yesterday. Well, you got Ben Johnson, Caleb Williams, and then a draft prospect we're about to talk to, Scott, which is probably why you just said it, Caleb Johnson. So you convert it gets confusing.
But spelled differently.
Yeah, with a K. Yeah. All right.
How about a segue? That was a good segue.
Yeah, well, here's the segue. Any Starbucks fights you getting into, or
well, you better watch yourself. Later. Braggs better watch himself.
Oh, Braggs definitely should watch himself. That was quite a
We haven't had a good Chicago media fight in a long time.
That's a good point.
Usually the Bears beat that makes the news with that.
Yeah, that's a good point. I don't think
it's been about 10 years.
It's been a while. Let's keep it that
there's
way.
some bickering, but
there's definitely bickering, but
usual.
Let's keep it that way. I don't think we need any of that nonsense. All right. Let's do this. Let's bring in our guy, Scott Dochterman from The Athletic. Talk to him about some of these prospects. He covers college football and a lot of good insight here. So we'll bring in Scott right now. All right, Scott Dochterman covers college football for The Athletic. Iowa ties too. So there's a guy named Caleb Johnson. I know we want to talk about. I know you know a lot about.
He's like trying to show me film of him, and I'm like, our listeners can't see this. Man.
We were literally in the show the other day. I was like, here's some. I'm like pulling up film.
I love this guy.
Nobody could see it. Whatever. It's fun. Is he the real deal though?
Is he the real deal? Yeah, he is. And he's one of probably 5 or 6 running backs that I think are starters in this draft. And he's a different kind because he's bigger than probably the rest of them. I mean, he is legitimately a 6'2", 230-ish type of back. And I kind of compare him to Larry Johnson, maybe David Johnson. So it's not just the last name. It's just the style of running, or, kind of a bigger guy, very, very fast. He's going to run sub 4.5 if he runs here. And so he's physical. He can, attack defenders. The one thing that he doesn't have that maybe a few of the other guys have is he doesn't have as much wiggle. And so if you're looking for, hey, you want Jahmyr Gibbs, from Ben Johnson's offense with Detroit, you're probably not going to get that with him. But if you want somebody who's going to kind of pound between the tackles, if you want to run gap or if you want to run mid zone, he's perfect for it. Probably the best one of, even though I think Ashton Jeanty's by far the best running back. I think he's the best if you want to play that style of football.
So maybe a blend of Dave Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs. Is that a fair description?
Yeah, I would say maybe. He's not as, he's not nearly as quick or maybe as explosively quick as Jahmyr Gibbs. He's bigger than David Montgomery. Yeah. He's, a little more physical. David was great. I mean, I covered him in Iowa State for a couple of years. And I would say Caleb is a better running back than David was, even though David's been very productive in the NFL. And 4 or 5 of the other backs are probably more comparable to him. He's kind of unique because, as tall as he is, sometimes he struggled early on with getting his pads down and finishing runs. He had a really good running backs coach who just left for the Giants this week. So, but this year was interesting for him because he kind of started the year in the doghouse. He skipped a meeting in training camp and got suspended for the first half of the first game. And, the offensive lineman came to him and they had like a come to Jesus meeting. And they said, hey, we need you. You're better than this. Knock it off. I mean, they're pretty strong with him. And what you look at a guy like Caleb Johnson, he's got 2 passes to go. He could take the, screw you guys, I'm done. Don't tell me what to do. Or in his case, which really benefited him, he took it to heart and said, all right, you're right, and I'm going to work on that. And so he redoubled his efforts. He went in the second half, had 150 yards and 2 touchdowns that first game, ended up leading the Big Ten, set Iowa's single season touchdown record. Could do it in the air. He's not your prototype receiving.
But he could do it.
But he could do it. And I would just say, turn on the tape of the Nebraska game. I mean, he put everything. One resume, one play, 75-yard touchdown pass, caught a swing pass, stiff-armed a guy, broke through 3 tackles, juked a couple other guys, and raced past the rest of the secondary for the end zone. It was like, okay, there's your highlight reel play. And then he had several others throughout his career.
So I hadn't heard that about, the beginning of the season. Do you think that that's something that he's going to have to overcome here in the draft process with teams, just if that's a lingering question about maybe how invested he really is?
I think it's a question for sure, but I think he answered it during the season, because at that point he'd shown flashes. He'd had a division clinching run against Illinois the year before, a 40-yard dash, and it showed he had 200 yards in another game against Purdue a couple of years ago, the year Purdue won the division. And he had a lot of moments, but then there was some questions about how dedicated he was, but kind of getting pulled aside. And he talked about it throughout the season. Just it forced him to grow up, become more mature, and to his credit, he did it. I mean, and every week his mindset, and he praised his linemen, and not in a way where it's superficial like a lot of guys do. He was legitimately that way, and it took a while for the linemen to kind of, they acknowledged his talent, but it took a while before their rhetoric kind of caught up and said, yeah, he's a guy we trust.
One of the big stories this week, at least in the past 24 hours, is Abdul Carter and his foot strain or stress fracture.
Yeah, it sounds
stress
like
reaction.
Yeah,
stress reaction.
Yeah.
Doesn't sound as bad as it was initially reported. What do you make of that? How do you think that affects his draft stock? And then what was it like watching him at Penn State? I know you know the Big Ten better than anyone.
Yeah, it's an injury that I think is kind of like plantar fasciitis. And I wouldn't, if anybody passes on him because of that, they're stupid. This guy's the
NFL teams can be stupid.
Yeah, they are. They absolutely are. I don't know how many times I've seen very productive players in college just get bypassed because, well, their arms were 32 and a half instead of 33, or, they were 6'1" instead of 6'2". I mean, it happens and then who ends up out of a job with the guys who decide to do that? Abdul Carter moved from linebacker to defensive end this year. They kind of envisioned him to be kind of that Micah Parsons type, but they lost some good, pass rushers the year before, and he was as good or better than any of them. Chop Robinson, I think, went to the Cardinals, and a couple others, and he is an explosive, forceful player. And that was only his first year as an edge rusher, and he was the most dominant defender, I thought, in the Big Ten last year. So if he's available, you got to take him now. His shoulder, again, tough player. He played, and it was in bad shape, but he played against Notre Dame and went all the way down to the end. And his stress reaction that's a tough. I've seen a couple basketball players with that try to fight through it, and it's horrible. But he'll be fine, I'm sure, by camp.
Where do you think the 2 Ohio State pass rushers kind of fit amongst a pretty darn good class of pass rushers? I'm just thinking of, well, you look at the Bears draft with the 2 second-round picks. Those guys are on the table, I think, for consideration there. So, tell us about them. Where do they rank in this class?
I would put them right near where the Bears draft in the second round. Yeah. I don't know that I look at either one of them and say, like Abdul Carter, I think he can be a number 1 edge rusher. He could be, top 5 in sacks type of guy. I look at JT Tuimoloau and Jack Sawyer as both really good starting defensive linemen, edge players who can really help perform. And if they're opposite a number 1, they're going to be really good. So, and with Martez Sweat, if they're opposite him, like JT Tuimoloau, my kind of comp for him is AJ Epineza, who's been a really solid player for the Buffalo Bills, 5 sacks, and been
late first-round pick.
He was actually a second round pick. He could fill in the second round, but he's got a second contract. He's a starter. He's a good, dependable player, probably not a Pro Bowl player. I think Tuimoloau maybe has a little bit more pass rush ability to him. I mean, he had 10.5 tackles for loss in the 4 playoff games and 6.5 sacks. It was incredible. Jack Sawyer is the kind of guy that everybody wants on a roster because he was the heart and soul of Ohio State. And he's a good quote for us. So that's great. But he's a good pass rusher, again, I don't know that he's a number one, but you got him opposite a guy, he's going to be great. I kind of compare him maybe to Connor Barwin from the Eagles a few years ago. He's not real explosive, but he's just tough. And if he gets one-on-one with, say, a right tackle, then I think he's got a chance to win some reps there. So if either one of them are around, and what is it, 39 and 41 for the Bears?
Yep.
Yeah. I think either one of them are around, I would really look hard at that.
Well, and with the Abdul Carter situation, I mean, it will be interesting to watch. But, if you're a team like the Bears sitting there at 10 and you're just trying to envision scenarios where somebody like that falls, maybe a stress reaction in the foot's not the worst thing.
Yeah. If he's there, take him. I mean,
the problem is, though, and the Bears have been guilty of this in the past, and it was a story with Karan Amagaji. They drafted in the third round last year. It's like anytime an NFL team drafts a player that has some type of injury problem at the time they're being drafted, just sets up a situation where you just get killed for it if it doesn't work out. Now I would think Abdul Carter's kind of
the exception
exception to that. I mean, it's much different than drafting a guy in the third round out of Yale who's hurt. So it's an interesting situation, and I doubt he'll even fall to 10 even with the issue, but you never know.
Is that a kind of guy you want to jump up for? That if he's at 5 and the Jaguars are going, well, we kind of like Mason Graham. Maybe he's not there. Bo Campbell, we're not sure he's number one left tackle. Maybe we like Kelvin Banks, and he's probably a little more down. That could be a situation where the Bears might say, we got an extra 2. And, usually you want to keep that draft capital, especially if you're the Bears in this division. But, he's good. I mean, now I won't put him in Micah Parsons' category because he is proven it. But I do think Abdul Carter, I compare him to DeMarcus Ware. I mean, and not that I think he's a Pro Bowl or a Hall of Fame guy yet, but just style and method, I think he's in that category.
I know free agency hasn't happened yet. Obviously, there's a bunch of rumors that will come out of Indy. We're not even done with Indy yet.
Right.
But if you're looking at that number 10 pick, and I don't know, is it pass rusher that takes priority? Is it maybe the second best pass rusher, or are you looking at the third best lineman? Like what players do you envision being there at number 10 for the Bears?
I mean, if Carter's there, take him for sure. I wouldn't even think twice about that. But, I think with the Bears, you look at 68 sacks with an offensive-minded head coach and a quarterback you drafted number 1 overall. You kind of got to get that corrected. And if so, I mean, Kelvin Banks, he was hurt during the playoff and he was banged up, but he's, the Outland Trophy winner. He was really good for Texas. He's a guy, if you think that, you still want to try to get one more year out of Braxton Jones, then, he can play inside. There's no problem with that. And maybe he's your best bet left tackle in year 2. Or you say, what, he's good enough. We're going to move him out there. He's the type of guy that I would really target, I guess, in that. There's some edge rushers, Jalen Walker. He was more of a, he was kind of like Abdul Carter a year ago, kind of off-ball pass rusher, linebacker that transitions better to being an edge rusher. That's probably more of a projection right now. So I don't know that I would,
Well, here's the question. Is there a prospect that you think that you like? Like last year, a couple of years ago, it was Darnell Wright, who was maybe a late first-round pick. But then later in the process, here he is at number 10. The Bears go down to Tennessee. They fall in love with the guy, and they think he's a building block for the future. Like, do you have guys that you like? Let's stick with the linemen, too, because that's where the investment should be for the Bears. Like, who's your surprise pick at 10?
Oh, man. Of course, I'm leaning into Banks because I think he's that type of player. And I know corner's not the number 1 position probably the Bears need.
If the Bears draft a corner, Chicago might freak out.
I know. But Will Johnson's another guy. Yeah. Now, let me ask you this. I mean, what would be the appetite at tight end? Is Cole Kmet, he's been good is what I would call him, just good. But Tyler Warren is better than good. Yeah. And is he the type of guy that you go, well, you know what? We diversify our passing attack. We give that third down option. And I've seen a lot of great Iowa tight ends, obviously. But as a collegian, he's been the best that I've probably seen other than Brock Bowers. Yeah. Probably in the last 10 years.
And look what Brock Bowers did in his rookie year.
Exactly. 100 plus catches. I mean, and if you got that security blanket, because you're going to lose Keenan Allen. He wasn't quite the player you were hoping for. You want Rome Odunze to grow. He's Tyler Warren. I don't know that I would draft Colston Loveland at 10, but if you trade down, I would strongly consider him at like 16 or 18 or something like that. And he's a similar type player. And then if you just, and then getting tight ends, you get into the third round. There's Luke Lachey, who's really good. So there's a lot of really good tight ends.
And it's an Iowa tight end.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously his dad played, right?
Yeah.
So you can't go wrong taking Iowa tight end.
Yeah, exactly. His dad was Ohio State All-American, 3-time All-Pro with I think the Chargers and Redskins back in the 80s and early 90s. And then if you get in the second round, there's some Oregon defensive or offensive tackles. So if you decide to go edge rusher or you go to get something defensive right off the bat, defensive tackle is really, really deep. But I like Josh Connerly from Oregon. He rarely gave up any pressures, although Jack Sawyer did get to him a little bit in the Rose Bowl. But he would be a guy if 39 or 41 if you want to get another tackle. And then Donovan Jackson at Ohio State. Talk about a money player. He was a guard. He was legitimately one of the best guards in the country. And then when they had injuries to Josh Simmons and Seth McLaughlin, especially Simmons at left tackle, he kicked outside. He struggled a little bit early because he had to go against Abdul Carter right after that at left tackle. And, kind of a little shorter arms, not as much quickness in his feet, but he stabilized. He didn't give up any sacks in his last 8 games at that position. And it's like, well, maybe we need to evaluate him at tackle. And I think he's another guy that might be there, maybe late first round, but he could be there at 39, I think.
Speaking of Simmons, what do you know about how, significant that injury is going to be lingering? Because it wasn't a good one. It wasn't one that you're like, oh, he'll be back in 6 months and no issues. But he's a really good player.
Yeah, he's a really good player. It's probably one that you don't want to say it's a red shirt year for him, but I think it's one of those that, he might be healthy with quotation marks going into camp, but how much of that do you want to risk with your first rounder to go through a 17-game season and preseason to go along with it in camp? You're probably going to have to take him slow. I don't know that I would put him in the shotgun right away. I think I would try to pull him back and, have him on a snap count for a while.
Are we not talking about how good this defensive tackle class is? Like enough? Like, can we give us more names because the Bears, yes, they need a pass rusher, but those pass rushers can come from the inside too. And I think even Ryan Poles hinted at that on Tuesday. So who could be there 39 and 41?
Oh man, you want to? I mean, they're going to be up and down the lineup, and there are a lot of guys that I really think about. If Kenneth Grant from Michigan slips that far, take him. I mean, that tandem with Mason Graham, who may not be there at 10, and if he's there at 10, you take him.
You run to the podium, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think him and Abdul Carter are like 1-1 at their positions, and then Tyleek Hamilton from Ohio State. Terrific player, very athletic for his size. I mean, he's a space eater. Maybe Jalen Carter. Not, it's hard to say. I really wanted him for the Bears a couple years ago. I got a lot of
so did Adam.
Yeah.
I got a lot of feedback on my grades after that because he took Darnell Wright, and I'm like,
you did not like that. Yeah,
I think I gave him an F just because the best 3-tech, and you got a coach who wants a 3-tech. He's there. And I feel like I've been vindicated a little bit by that. But if you're looking down the line a little bit, Derek Harmon from Oregon, he was at Michigan State before that, really athletic, plug the holes. I mean, he's everything you want. But then down the road, I mean, if you're like, oh, we got other guys fitting in here and you want to get in the 3rd, 4th, 5th round, Ty Robinson from Nebraska is really held up. He was the best defensive lineman on a really good defense. I mean, they were 7-6 overall, but their defense was pretty legit and stopping the run and doing everything. And he was the reason for that. I really liked, Jamari Caldwell from Oregon was also, he teamed with Derek Harmon. They were really good. Even farther probably down, Jay Toa from UCLA is that rock, just that guy that you play him over nose or something. And then Y.A. Black, who I think was at the Senior Bowl, 6'5", 340, and like looks like he's 280 just because of the way it's positioned on him. He's as good of a 2-gap defensive lineman as you'll get. So if you throw him over the nose and say, just pressure the pocket and take up blockers, everybody else will take care of itself. He's a guy, you probably get him in the 4th or 5th round and feel really good about it. Jordan Phillips too, from Maryland, is also outstanding.
Scott, awesome information. Appreciate you coming on, and
we'll
have to get you back on before the draft.
Sounds good, man.
Yeah.
Give the Bears a better grade this year, regardless of the day.
I think I might have to. I mean, all these people were calling me Packers, a Packers fan, and I'm like, you don't know how bad that hurts me.
Scott Dochterman, make sure you're reading everything he's got. College football, the NFL draft, all this stuff for The Athletic, theathletic.com/Hoge and Jahns. Thanks, man.
All right, thanks.
All right, from Scott Dochterman to Dave Birkett, Detroit Free Press, covers the Lions, does a great job. Follow him on Twitter at Dave Birkett. And we wanted to talk to you, obviously, with, the Ben Johnson connection and everything, but it's like he's having a week, like just all the interviews he's doing, where I think we're seeing a different side of him. I mean, he's only been the Bears coach for like a month now, but
We're learning.
Yeah.
Like he's on part of my take talking about his testicles.
That happened.
Yes.
Oh,
yeah.
wow. I
Like
didn't hear that.
Like
yeah.
he would.
That was nothing we ever got on
No,
Coordinator
you
Thursday.
never said
No, the topic never came up. I'll be honest about that. Yeah.
Like, he's willing to part with them for a couple Super Bowls. Like, is that the Ben Johnson
Okay.
you know?
So I think a lot of that comes from Dan Campbell. I mean, honestly, like there was an interview Dan had early in his days with Detroit where it was like, I would give up my, cut off my finger. I don't remember the body part, but he said he was willing to part with the body part. So
Yeah.
I think a lot of what I've heard from Ben, even his introductory press conference when he was talking about, he told maybe it was Ryan Poles or whoever the interview committee, like, I want this job. Like that was Dan's deal with Detroit, like 8 a.m. morning after a playoff game, they, interviewing by Zoom, and he's got one of his big old coffees and he sits down and he's like, I want this job. So a lot of what I've heard from Ben mirrors what I've heard from Dan. And I don't know that it's like he's trying to copycat Dan. I don't mean to imply that, but they worked together in Miami.
Yeah.
They spent 4 years together in Detroit and different personalities. But I do think there's a lot of Dan that rubbed off on a lot of his coaches, and Ben included.
John Greenberg wrote a column for The Athletic where he described him as cocky in his press conference here. And that's a good thing. Like John wanted that conveyed as a good thing because Bears coaches have been deferential, I guess, in the past. Like, so is Ben Johnson confident and cocky? Like, how would you describe his personality, his demeanor in a sense?
Yeah, no, I wouldn't describe him as cocky necessarily, but I get that a little bit because, and I do think it's important because your players take on a lot of the personality of your coach, right?
Yeah.
And if you project that like confidence, like, we're going to go out and kick your ass. I don't know if I can say that here, but whatever, right? There we go. I said it, like that, your players buy into that. And so I do look, Ben's a very smart guy. He's very bright. I mean, he did a great job, calling offense in Detroit. I don't think you could find anyone back there that wasn't a fan of him and what he did. And so he has a right to feel good about what this offense in Chicago is going to look like. And I think he's going to do a really good job with Caleb and with everyone that they have, all that talent.
Yeah, that's what I was about to ask you. Just like, because I remember when the Dolphins hired Adam Gase away from the Bears, and I was like, I don't know if that's going to work. But so what, I feel like when you cover a coordinator and they go on to have a head coach, you in your job, you've been with the guy for a while. You're pretty good. So what's your level of confidence? And you obviously know a lot about the Bears too, just, from being in the same division. What's your level of confidence this is going to work with Ben Johnson and the Bears?
Yeah, first of all, this is the first Lions coordinator that's got a job since like Chuck Knox, like going directly to a head coaching job. So it's been a long, long time.
And
so I haven't
two
seen it for 2 this year, and I mean a legit 50 years. But look, I think Ben is extremely good at what he does, and I know he's going to have a big hand in the offense in Chicago. He said that he wants to keep calling plays. That's his strength, right? Everyone has a superpower, and that's Ben's. And so I think he's right to do that. I think what he does with play sequencing, with the details, and making sure that his offensive players, his team now are on top of those details. I think there's that's a big part of success that you have in the NFL. So I do think he has a shot to be a very successful head coach and get this offense humming. That said, like, this is a good division. There's 4 good coaches now in this division, I think. And we were talking to Adam a little bit earlier, just the what Ben did with Jared Goff in Detroit. Jared came in and, he was nobody knew even the Lions, they didn't know exactly what they had with him. But what he did was he got Jared to buy in by what he's talked about doing with Caleb, is giving him ownership of the offense. And hey, let's do what you like to do. I'm going to build that around you, but this is what you have to do for me. And Jared became very comfortable with taking the safe play. Like, you know what? I'm going to take that 3-yard check down. I'm going to trust my receiver to get, 2 extra yards, and then we're going to live to fight another play. And he did that, and he did that, and then they took a shot, play action to open it up. And Jared was very good about his decision making. And so I think within the structure of that, Caleb has some unique creative abilities, but as long as he plays within the structure of that, I think this offense can be real successful in Chicago.
I keep hearing about this intense, fiery side of Ben Johnson. Now, like, sometimes you don't see it in press conferences. I know former coaches in interviews I've done with them have described this side of Ben Johnson where he's coming off the practice field just drenched in sweat because he's so into it. He's so passionate, like so intensely passionate. Like, tell us about that. Like, what did you see in terms of challenging Jared Goff, challenging other offensive players, and taking control of that offense?
Yeah, if you stand next to him on a training camp practice, like, you'll hear him cussing people out, and even under his own breath, like, well, what are we doing there? He's an intense guy, and when you talk about the smartest guy in the room, that's probably legitimately him. So he is demanding, and those details matter a whole lot to him. He won't cut corners. I don't know that I remember him coming off drenched, maybe, but like it doesn't surprise me because that's the type of personality that he is. Like, he's all in on it, and again, I think. The thing I've learned from Dan and from covering the Lions is, as much as anything, is that as long as you are your authentic self, because we've seen it in Detroit where other people weren't. You guys have probably seen it in Chicago too. Like, that's when things go awry, and it doesn't guarantee that you're going to have success just being yourself, but you can't fake it. Players understand it. Coaches, the people that you work with, they understand it. The fans, I think, even get it. And that's really who Ben is. And so as long as he stays true to him, and he doesn't try to, overdo it and be Dan, or he doesn't, dumb some of the things down that are really important to him, those details, because that would drive him mad. I think if he let off the gas on that, and some of the players, weren't on the details when he knows that he has to press them to be on that, I think he can be a good head coach.
We've been through this before many times, and I always say, like, you like, we're in the honeymoon phase right now, right? Like, so you don't really know how a coach is going to really be until they handle some losses, handle some adversity. Now, I know he just had a lot of success with the Lions. Lions didn't lose many games, but how was he after losses? Obviously, you don't get to talk to him right after the game. It's usually a few days later, so it's a different situation. But just, how did he handle whenever adversity did strike?
I would say he was accountable. We got him on Thursday, so people in Chicago know that was sort of our coordinator day. So it was, several days after the game, and maybe he had a chance to reflect, and maybe that's why we didn't see that emotion all the time. But, he was, he was willing to poke fun at himself. He was willing to have a little bit of fun. He was accountable about things. He was a pretty open book. I mean, maybe not quite to the extent that Dan was, but I think all those things apply. And then, you guys know the creativity of it too. I think everyone's seen that out there with the willingness to draw up whatever sort of plays that he can to take shots, and, whatever's in that game plan, spill it no matter what the score is. And so, maybe that's where some of that, the outside appearance of people thinking he's cocky comes from. But, that's what the Lions are like. They have a little attitude about them. And so I think Ben, again, I've seen it the other way where, it's, you never want to, point the finger inwardly first. And so I think Ben was good about that and accepting when things went wrong in Detroit, maybe even to the extent that, we'd say, well, that wasn't really Ben's, fault. That was a bad interception or a bad route or whatever it was. But Ben was accountable about things.
My last question for you is, you've covered Lions forever. You've covered this division forever.
Thanks for aging me. Yeah.
I feel I'm on my 6th coach here, man.
Yeah.
Like, how many Lions coaches are you up to?
We've been around about the same time.
So he's staying in division. Like, he's poking fun at Matt LaFleur, right? He wants to coach against Dan Campbell. Like, what do you make of all that?
I love it, actually. I do. I really do, because I think it, again, watching this from the Detroit side of things, and kind of knowing what Lions fans have been through and all the coaching changes I've seen over there. Like, I've seen how Dan and this staff have ignited a fan base. I mean, you guys see it when the Lions have come there the last couple of years, just how loaded it is with Lions fans and like the passion that they have. A lot of that comes from being like, this is a coach I can get behind. And
The Bears
I
notice it
feel that
too.
way too. You know, like I want to get after Matt LaFleur too. So yeah, I don't mind it at all. And you know, Dan said the other day, somebody had asked Dan about like, are you glad Ben's in the division, you know, like the competitor in you? And he was like, I'm not getting into that. You know, Ben and I are really good friends, but obviously we play twice a year.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I think that's ultimately the way that Ben feels too. Like he and Dan have a really good relationship. They had one in Miami. That's why Dan, when he came to Detroit, he kept Ben, because Ben was obviously here on staff under Matt Patricia. But I think it'll be fun, and it's a great division, and there's nothing wrong with embracing those rivalries.
Yeah, a little trash
Yeah, I'm
talk.
excited about it. I mean, I had a chance to visit with Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery in New Orleans a couple weeks ago, and it's like, you know, the Lions players are like, oh, we love Ben, but they're like, we're gonna kick his ass.
Yeah,
like it's, you know, so
it's okay to acknowledge that,
yeah, it's
right?
awesome.
Like, yeah,
I love
that's
it.
my boy. But right, it's like when you play basketball and you're
Yeah.
playing against, you know, your buddy that's the best player on the other team. Like, I'm gonna check you up and I'm gonna shut you down, and let's see what happens.
Look, we're not too far removed from seeing like Mitch Trubisky against David Blau on Thanksgiving.
Right.
So you know, if we get this Bears Lions thing going a little bit more twice a year, it would be good. So Dave, thanks so much, man.
Yeah,
Great
absolutely,
stuff.
man. For sure.
Appreciate you.
Thanks, guys.
All right, fun visiting with Dave Birkett. Good stuff from Scott Dochterman.
So are you more in love with Caleb Johnson? Not the combination of Ben Johnson and Caleb Williams, but the
I don't
running
know.
back?
That part I'm a little worried about. If you have Caleb Johnson, Ben Johnson, Caleb Williams, it's going to get confusing. I do like how confident people seem to be about Ben, though.
Yes.
It's a different vibe. Certainly a different vibe from when the Bears hired Matt Eberflus.
And even to go back to Matt Nagy, now there was some excitement hiring an offensive mind from the Andy Reid tree. And there was a lot of history of success from hiring off that tree, but never really on the offensive side of the ball. I keep going back
to.
He
had never done it before.
Yeah, and
he never called plays.
That is the biggest difference. I was just about to say, let's keep going back to that. 3 years of calling plays for the best offense in the NFL.
Yeah.
The Bears hired that guy.
Yeah. Well, we got to get out of here because we hijacked the CHGO and All City table.
That's what we do, baby.
And we needed to talk to, I think we're talking to Mike Florio or something in a couple minutes. So we got to get out of here. Fun show. Definitely enjoyed it. Still got some more time here in Indy. So we'll be back next week with plenty more insight as the fallout of the combine continues. Then we inch our way towards free agency. Certainly next week we'll be talking a lot about that. So make sure you're following us on Twitter at Adam Hoge, at Adam Jahns. Read these guys. Kevin Fishbane standing behind the camera. By the way, you should read him too in The Athletic, theathletic.com.
Still rocking his vest.
Yeah, it's good. We had the vest. We had the vest going last night. Strong group.
Best group.
The vest. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
It's like vest weather here. It's like been in the 50s
It's been beautiful
all week. All right. Thanks so much for watching, listening. Appreciate you. Please subscribe. Please hit that like button. Rate and review the pod. All those things we greatly appreciate. All the support. Talk to you next week.
See ya.